I didn't plan to fall in love on a wet Kansas afternoon. I only wanted to get out of the rain. The wind pushed sheets of cold water across the street, turning the sidewalks into shallow rivers. My hair, usually neat and pinned, clung to my cheeks in damp strands. My blazer stuck to my back like a second skin. I ran anyway, heels slipping, breath tight, stomach rumbling. I told myself I just needed a sandwich, a warm drink, 15 quiet minutes. Then I saw the striped awning and the glowing window, the one with hand-painted letters that read, Mad Hatter's Tea Party. I lunged for cover, heart pounding, and almost crashed into her. Sorry, I blurted, but the word never fully left my mouth. I looked up and the rest of the world blurred. She was tall, with dark hair tucked behind one ear and blue eyes that looked serious at first glance and soft the second you held them. She gave me a small smile, the kind that feels private, like a secret shared between strangers. The rain hissed along the curb. A bell chimed faintly inside the café. I could smell chocolate and cinnamon and something warm like vanilla. She lifted the edge of the awning with one hand, making a little more space for me, and said I looked like I needed heat. She wasn't wrong. Inside, it was all mismatched chairs and framed quotes and tiny lamps that cast honey-colored light. The windows fogged at the edges. The air felt friendly. We shook off rain and dripped on the doormat. She told me her name was Kennedy and that this was her place, her dream turned real with chipped mugs, crooked shelves, and a display case of scones. She slid 2 hot chocolates across a small round table and said cinnamon helps when you've had a day. I wrapped both palms around the mug and felt my fingers return to life. When I looked up, she was watching me with that same patient focus, as if I was a story she wanted to hear from the beginning. I told her the beginning was work. I told her I was a project manager who made lists for a living, and the only surprise I liked was when a meeting ended early. She laughed low, warm, and said she was the exact opposite. She lived for surprise, for strange ideas, for the kind of risk that makes your chest feel busy and bright. We talked until the streetlights came on. The rain softened from a roar to a hush. I learned she collected vinyl and rescued stray cats. She learned I kept a shoebox of movie ticket stubs because I liked the way time felt when you could hold it in paper. When I stood to leave, the bell chimed again and the door breathed in cold air and the night smelled like wet asphalt and sugar. I walked home thinking about her hands, how steady they were as she poured, how sure and about the way her smile made my ribs loosen. I went back 2 days later for coffee and a pastry I didn't need. She remembered my order like it was obvious. You look less storm-tossed today, she said, and I told her only on the outside. We were busy at work, building something for a client with impossible deadlines and extra opinions. She listened, not like a person waiting for their turn, but like someone who wanted the whole picture. After that, I kept finding reasons to stop by, the long lunch that could be short, the quick hello that turned into an hour. Every time, the door chimed like it was happy to see me. Every time, I left with the same steady hum under my sternum. The first time she closed early, the sky was pink behind clouds. She asked me to stay while she wiped down the counter. I stacked chairs without being asked. We stood shoulder to shoulder in the kind of silence that is full, not empty. When we stepped outside, the air had shifted. The street gleamed. The windows held our reflections, side by side and close. She lifted a hand and pushed one damp curl off my cheek. Her fingers were cool. My pulse turned loud. The world seemed to lean in. I didn't move because I didn't know how. She didn't move because maybe she didn't want to break the spell. Then she laughed, soft, nervous, and the moment folded itself away like a note you plan to read later. I went home and lay on my couch with the lights off. The rain started again, tapping the glass like a gentle insistence. I felt strange and good and unsteady, like I'd stepped off a curb in the dark and found water where I expected stone. I told myself it was a crush and crushed the word down until it was small enough to fit in my pocket. But crushes grow in the dark. We started texting. It began with a photo of a cat asleep in a mixing bowl and grew into late-night messages about books and music and the tiny, heavy questions you only ask when you trust the person on the other end. She sent songs that felt like a window opening. I sent movies that felt like courage. I slept with the phone on my pillow and woke to her good morning, which made the day sit up straighter. One Saturday, she packed a picnic and told me to meet her at Loose Park. The sun was kind that day, warm without pushing. We spread a blanket under a wide oak and ate grilled cheese with fancy mustard and strawberries that stained our fingers. Families wandered by. A dog chased a bee. She lay on her back and watched a cloud unspool into nothing. I watched her watch it, memorizing the way her mouth softened when she felt peaceful. When a breeze lifted a strand of hair across her cheek, I reached to tuck it behind her ear. She turned at the exact same moment. My hand was still there when our eyes met. The world went hush. I leaned first. She met me halfway. The kiss was simple and deep and careful like a promise. It felt like coming home and discovering the furniture had moved in the best possible way. After that, the city changed shape. Corners I'd never noticed held new meaning. The back room of the café was not just storage, but a place where we could stand too close and laugh while the espresso machine sighed. My boring office suddenly had a window I liked because at 5:30 the light turned gold in a way that matched the café. My apartment, which had always been neat, became a little less perfect and a lot more alive. A hair tie on the coffee table, a sweater on the chair, 2 mugs in the sink. We told no one at first. Not out of shame, out of wanting to keep the soft thing soft while it learned how to breathe. We lived in the space between public and private, where hands could brush and not be noticed, where eyes could meet and then politely look away. It was sweet and warm and ours, and I thought I could hold it like that forever. Life loves to test forever. The call came on a Tuesday. My boss asked me to come in early. His voice was flat in that way that means he is trying to sound normal. He told me I'd done excellent work and then offered me a promotion that lived in Chicago. He talked about leadership and growth and a salary that made my pulse stutter. He said my name like a vote of confidence. I nodded a lot because that's what people do when doors swing open. I kept nodding on the drive to the cafe. I kept nodding when the bell chimed and Kennedy looked up and saw my face and understood immediately that something had tilted. We sat in our corner. I told her everything in plain words and careful breath. Her eyes were steady, but her fingers tightened around her mug as if it might cool too fast. She said it was the chance I had worked for. She said we could try long distance. She said she wouldn't be the person who told me to choose small. I heard the bravery in her voice and felt the ache under it. It would have been easier if she had told me to stay. It would have been easier to break my own heart than hers. I took the job. The weeks before the move were full of boxes and easy tears. We tried to make the most of time as if time could be stretched like dough. We ate dinner on the floor of my apartment and called it a picnic. We danced in the kitchen with the window open and called the wind a guest. The last night, we lay awake until almost dawn, her chin on my shoulder, my palm on her ribs to count the way her breath rose and fell. I pretended sleep was not real and morning was a rumor. Chicago was big and loud and electric. The river looked like it was thinking. The trains sang their metal songs. My new office high above the street made the people below look like a study in ants. The job was good. The job was everything they promised and more. But every good thing knocked against an empty place that had the shape of her. We called every night. We tried to keep the small rituals, the way she always asked what I ate, the way I always told her about the strange thing I saw. At first, it worked. Then work grew bigger. The calls got shorter. She closed the cafe late on Saturdays. I flew back every other weekend and left on Sundays with a stomach like a fist. We didn't mean to fight, but distance makes small misunderstandings bloom into tall weeds. A missed text felt like a choice. A delayed reply read like a change of heart. We said the word complicated, and both of us heard the word broken. The worst fight came on a quiet night. I said something sharp. She said something honest. There was a silence I didn't know where to put. I hung up because I didn't know how to stay. I stood at my window and watched the city breathe and felt like I was watching a life I didn't want. For weeks, we hardly spoke. I poured myself into work until I felt thin at the edges. I ate at my desk and pretended chewing was the same as tasting. I told everyone I was fine and put their belief in me like a bandage that did not stick. Sometimes clarity arrives like a door slammed by the wind. Mine arrived with a memory. The first day, the hot chocolate, the way she moved like someone who trusted her own feet. I booked a flight without telling her. I didn't want words. I wanted a doorbell and the sound of a bell in a café and the sight of her apron strings tied crooked at the small of her back. I walked in as she was counting the till. She looked up. Her face changed in slow motion. Surprise, relief, fear, hope. I crossed the floor and said her name like a prayer I had been repeating for weeks. Then I said I was sorry. I said I hated the person I had to be in Chicago if being that person meant losing the person I am with you. I said I would call my boss and take a different position or a lesser one or none. I said I didn't care what the map looked like as long as it had a table with 2 mugs on it and a little bell that chimed when one of us entered the room. She cried. I cried. We laughed in the middle of crying because it felt ridiculous to stand in a room that smelled like cinnamon and cry big city tears. I kissed the corner of her mouth because it felt like the right punctuation. She held my hand and squeezed 3 times, which is how she says I love you without saying it out loud. Then the idea came like a good kind of lightning. What if we didn't choose one city or the other? What if we chose us and let the rest arrange itself? I told her we could open a second cafe in Chicago, small at first, a sister shop with the same heart. I told her I could work part-time while we built it, then full-time once it stood on its own legs. She didn't say yes at once. She is careful with dreams. She asked about money and leases and permits. We made a list, of course we did. It's how we both felt brave. Then she smiled the smile that starts at her eyes and said okay. The bell chimed, as if the cafe itself approved. The next months were full of paper and paint and problem-solving. We signed a lease for a corner space with tall windows and a stubborn radiator. We sanded and scrubbed and argued about the right shade of yellow. We learned the sound Chicago makes at dawn. We learned which suppliers are early and which ones mean tomorrow when they say it. We found a second-hand espresso machine and listened to it like doctors listening to a heart. We hung a sign with hand-painted letters that matched the first, Mad Hatter's Tea Party. When we unlocked the door that first day, a handful of neighbors wandered in with curious faces. A little boy pressed his palms to the pastry glass like it was a zoo. A nurse in scrubs asked for the strongest thing we had. An elderly couple shared an almond croissant and argued about whether the almond flavor was too bold or just right. We looked at each other over the milk steamer and felt like we'd been given the keys to a house we had always loved but never known how to find. Not every day was sweet. The radiator hissed and then refused to be useful until a man named Earl hit it with a wrench exactly 3 times, as if it were a stubborn mule. A sudden storm pushed water under the back door and swallowed half a box of tea bags. The health inspector came on a morning the dishwasher decided to throw a tantrum. We learned to smile and apologize and fix and try again. We learned to keep cookies in the back for when bad news walked in wearing human clothes. We learned that sometimes the only answer to a hard day is to lock the door early, sit on the counter, and split a lemon bar with 2 forks. We also learned that love can grow in a room full of strangers. Regulars found us and made claims. The nurse in scrubs turned out to be named Anna and taught us the difference between tired and done. The elderly couple argued about everything and tipped like sailors. A quiet college student spent whole afternoons by the window and once left a sticky note that read, "Thank you for the safe place." We kept that note taped inside the register, where we could see it each time we made change. It became a small reminder that the work we were doing was not only coffee and scones. It was a kind of shelter we could offer the world and, on the hardest mornings, ourselves. On our first Christmas there, we hung paper snowflakes we cut by hand and ran a string of lights along the window like a smile. Kennedy stood on a chair to reach the top corner and nearly fell into my arms on purpose. I pretended to scold her. She pretended to be sorry. We closed early and walked through the city with our hands inside one mitten. The air tasted like ice and hope. We stopped on a bridge and watched the river forget its reflection. She looked at me with that same patient focus from the first day and said that every hard choice had led to this, and if she could go back and change the pain, she would not change the path. I didn't answer with words. I kissed her, slow and grateful, while a taxi honked like an impatient uncle and a woman in a red had cheered because she had a good heart and no filter. In the spring, we went back to Kansas to check on the first café. It looked smaller because the second one lived in my chest now, but it smelled the same, cinnamon and something like yes. The regulars there asked if we were happy. We said we were tired but brave and that it was the best mix we had ever tasted. We visited the oak tree at Loose Park and lay on a blanket that had outlived a winter or two. We looked up into a big, foolish sky. She asked what I would tell the woman I had been on that first rainy day if I could speak across time. I said I would tell her to step into the cafe and open her hands. She asked what I would tell my boss who offered the job that put the ocean inside our phones. I said I would tell him thank you because pain can be a door if you do not bolt it. She said she would tell her past self to trust that sometimes the stranger you hand a hot chocolate to will hand you a life back. We still fight. Of course we do. Love is not the end of conflict. It is the place you choose to come back to after you've both walked away to breathe. When I am scared, I make more lists. When she is scared, she makes bigger plans. We meet in the middle with tea and a legal pad and a habit of letting our knees touch under the table. When the dishwasher breaks now, it's a joke. When the inspector arrives, we greet her by name. When a storm pushes under the door, we lay down towels like a small army and call Earl. On the first anniversary of the Chicago Café, we hosted open mic gratitude. We baked too much. We brewed too much. We put a little brass bell on the counter, and every time someone wanted to share a thank you, we rang it. People said thank you for the extra shot and the extra kindness. Thank you for the seat by the outlet and the seat by the window. Thank you for remembering my name when my own brain didn't. Thank you for the way you asked, "How are you?" and waited for the answer. I stood behind the counter with flour on my sleeve and tried not to cry, but then Kennedy rang the bell and I was done for. She told the room she wanted to thank the stranger who ran into her under an awning on a day the sky could not stop crying. She said that stranger had become her person. The bell rang again, small and bright. I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand and thought, let this be the kind of life where we keep choosing each other out loud. Some nights I still wake at 3 a.m. My old anxiety likes that hour, the way the quiet feels unstable, the way the dark calls your name. When it happens now, I pad to the kitchen. The city hums outside like a distant ocean. I warm milk the way my grandmother taught me and stare at the blinking light on the coffee machine. Without fail, she appears a minute later, hair wild, socks unmatched, eyes soft with sleep. We don't say much. We lean on the counter with our shoulders touching and wait for our hearts to slow. Sometimes we laugh because we look like a pair of ghosts who learned how to hold mugs. Sometimes we cry because being human is work. Sometimes we just stand there until the floor under our bare feet feels like enough. If you ask me how it all changed, I will not talk about one big decision. I will talk about 1,000 small ones. The choice to step under an awning instead of running past it. The choice to sit. The choice to stay after closing for 5 extra minutes of silence. The choice to kiss in a park because the sky asked us to. The choice to answer the phone even when the news was heavy. The choice to get on a plane and put my apology in the right room. The choice to hang a second sign and paint a wall the color of warm bread. The choice to ring a bell and say thank you in front of strangers. I used to believe a good life was a straight line college, job, promotion, condo, vacation, upgrade. I thought happiness lived at bullet points. Now I think a good life is a map drawn in pencil and revised with love. There are places on mine where the eraser tore the page a little. You can see the repair if you hold it to the light. There are corners with fingerprints made of cinnamon and milk. There is a river that looks like a thought. There are 2 small cafes with crooked lamps that throw warm light and a bell that rings when someone you love comes in from the rain. So this is my confession. The day I met Kennedy, I thought I needed a warm drink and a dry place to stand. I needed more than that. I needed a life that felt like my own. I needed a hand to hold when the storm moved from the sky to the inside of my chest. I needed a room where I could say I am scared and not be smaller for it. I needed a love that didn't ask me to be impressive, only to be honest. Now when I unlock the door each morning, the glass gives a small sigh and the bell makes its bright sound. The city wakes slowly. People wander in wrapped in coats and worries. We hand them cups and sugar and eye contact. We listen if they want to talk. We let them sit in the warm light and gather themselves for whatever waits outside. Sometimes I watch the door and think about the person I was and the person I am and all the rain between us. Then I go wipe a table or sugar a muffin or fix a wobbly chair because small work is sacred when love is the reason you're doing it. If you ever find yourself in our neighborhood on a day when the weather cannot decide, come in. The bell will ring. The glass will fog. The floor will show the marks of happy feet. I will be there behind the counter or near the sink, and she will be there too, tying her apron in a crooked bow. We will give you something warm for your hands and a place to sit, and you can tell us about your storm or your sunshine. If you listen closely, you will hear the soft sound the world makes when it is busy healing. And if you ask me what saved us, I will not say luck. I will say rain. I will say courage in small bites. I will say the stubborn belief that warmth can change the shape of a day. Mostly I will say her name and mean home. Because on the day I ducked under that striped awning, the sky gave me weather and the door gave me welcome and she gave me everything else.